Well, I want to give a big thank you to Mr. Ames and all of the teachers of Kaiako, the senior leadership team and the students, including these wonderful student leaders that have been showing me around the school. It's great to be here. And this is an example of what education can be. 93% of the students are present here today at this intermediate school of just under 600 students. That doesn't include a few more who are off at orchestra. So if you count them, then we are at the 94%, and that's our target for 94% of students at school every day. If we did that at every school, we would have reached the government's target. And here at the school, you can see many of the factors that this research from ERO tells you are important, that the students have a role to play, that they trust and like their teachers, that they're engaged in their learning. And having just gone through half a dozen classrooms, I can see that that rings true. When you meet Stephen, the principal at the front of the school, everything he says when he greets you actually rings true when you go and see the students. So thank you to Mr. Ames for hosting us here. We're here today to talk about some fabulous work that's been done by the Education Review Office. They have surveyed 15,000 students, educators and parents on attitudes to school attendance. This carries on from work that was started under the previous government in 2022, and I want to acknowledge the foresight of having this work done then so we have a comparison now. The news is almost universally positive. Apart from attendance rising from around 40% to 60% regular attendance, and just about every measure of attitudes towards school attendance, we are far ahead of where we were in 2022. I'll just give you one example. The question of whether students believe school is important to their future. 82% of low socioeconomic students believe school is important to their future. 84% of high socioeconomic students believe school is important to their future. It doesn't matter if students are rich or poor, they believe that education is the way to live the future they want. And that makes me incredibly happy, because we can blame all sorts of things, and there are barriers such as poverty that are important. But at the end of the day, when you've got over 80% of students, rich household, poor household, believe education is important to their future, it bodes well to the future, for the future of our country. What the report shows is that it's the parents and the schools, but most importantly, the attitude of the student actually wanting to go, that are the most important determinants. There are things that schools can do, such as giving students a role, like these student leaders. If they feel that they have an important role at the school, they're more likely to go to the school. If the teachers set high expectations, they're more likely to go to the school. And 93% of teachers report setting high expectations for school attendance. That again is a significant improvement on where we were just 3 years ago. The government also has a role to play. And I believe it is because this government has been unapologetic about saying go to school, attendance matters, it's the number one priority for our future, that we've seen changes in attitudes right across the society. We don't say to people, stay home, save lives. We don't say that education is a low priority. We say that the most important number in New Zealand today is how many students go to school, because an educated population will solve any problem, and there will be many problems this century. An uneducated population can squander the prosperity of a great country like New Zealand if we're not careful, and that's why it matters so much that students get to school, and that's why we're fixing it. And yet, in spite of all of that, 40% is terrible, 60% is a massive improvement, but it's actually halfway to the government's target of 80% regular attendance in 2030. And that's why there's a whole lot more work to do. So yes, we've changed expectations. Yes, we've done advertising. We've changed health guidance. We're also next year rolling out attendance action plans. We're going to roll out an extra $140 million of attendance service over the next 4 years. And we're going to have the STAR, the Stepped Attendance Response Scheme, in every school from term 1 next year. So we are halfway in the mission to get students attending school regularly. Some schools like this one, you could say, are just about right there already. However, we got to do it for every kid in this country. We're halfway there. We're very proud of the progress we're making, and we're very grateful for the very rigorous scientific research that's been done surveying 15,000 people by the Education Review Office. That's enough from me. Happy to take any questions.
Is this not comparing where we're at now to when we're in a pandemic? Of course it's going to improve, is it not?
I don't think so. Attitudes matter. Remember, if you ask a question like, is schooling important to your future? That's a 50-year time horizon. People in 2022 knew that the pandemic was going to end and education hadn't gone out of fashion forever. So yes, there was certainly lower attendance during the pandemic, and perhaps you could explain that as being a function of the pandemic, but it shouldn't have changed people's expectations. People's attitude towards school, the number of people who say, rich or poor, that school is important to my future, that has risen, and that's what makes me very excited for this country's future.
Just on that question, in your remarks you said you didn't say stay home, save lives. What did you mean by that?
That is what the government said for a long time.
Was that wrong for the government to say that?
I think one of the impacts of the government saying that is that education was put down the totem pole in our society. Perhaps people thought health needed to be emphasised, but we cannot ignore that a whole lot of education was lost in the process, and that has long-term impacts for children's futures.
So you put this increase in attendance down to changing attitudes as opposed to less people being sick with COVID?
The attitude of whether if you believe that school is important to your future, that doesn't change whether you're sick. So COVID could prevent people from attending, no question, but COVID shouldn't have changed people's view on whether schooling was important in the long term. That's what's changed, and I do put that down to the efforts of teachers and parents and students, but also the fact the government has been unapologetic about putting school attendance as, if not one of the greatest priority, then one of the greatest priorities for our country's future.
But two things can be true. People can be very passionate about going to school, thinking that's important, but also scared about a pandemic and choosing to stay home. Two things can be true.
Can I be clear about what this survey finds? 15,000 people were surveyed. Students were asked, is education important to your future? We've seen a 12-point increase for low socioeconomic students believing that education is important to their future. So you're right, two things can be true, but what this survey is showing that there has been a massive change in attitude quite apart from whether they actually attend, which has also increased.
So 30% of parents are comfortable with their children missing a week or more of school. Are you happy with that figure?
No, I think that it's far too high. That number is down, if I recall, from about 40 previously. And Ruth's nodding, so I got something right. But look, that's too high. And I think one of the things that comes out of the survey is that while parents are generally placing more value on going to school, parents are more relaxed on sometimes missing school. And one of the things we know is that the habit of regular attendance is a really big driver of educational success. So, I would say generally this is good news, but the one area, and I said nearly every indicator has improved. People have got a bit relaxed about sometimes missing school. In-term holidays remain one of the major drivers of absence for many principals. I see Mr. Ames here nodding. It's critical that we, while I respect people's view, I just want to put back the counter view that regular attendance and the habit of attendance is really important too.
Is there anything the government can do about those in-term holidays, which was said to be the main challenge?
Well, frankly, the thing that we're doing is we have put fining back on the table. There's been at least 15 inquiries from schools to the ministry about fining. 90% of what we're doing around attendance is helping people who can't go. That's why, yesterday's announcement, we're holding back 3% of the new attendance funding for incidentals, helping students with uniforms and stationery and transport and so on. So we think it's important to remove barriers. That comes out of the survey too. But there are some people who are not a can't, they're a won't. In fact, they've got so much resource that they're going to another country instead of being at school. And in that case, we think it's critical that we say, well, just a second, there is a responsibility to the student, and that responsibility is for their entire future. You can't deny them that by taking them out of school.
Eero suggested maybe staggering holidays for different regions or term dates. Would you seriously consider that?
We've had some discussion about that. It's quite common, for example, I think in Germany. But the thing about Germany is they're a federal country with many different states. New Zealand doesn't have that. Could you have different educational regions. Potentially, we could look into that, but as soon as you make a change like that, you can guarantee it will have other consequences that you may not want. So look, we're open to it, but I would just say where it's worked overseas, it's usually in much larger countries with many different states.
Okay, and Era also said, look, maybe we just accept that people are going overseas and we put more resource into catch-up classes.
Look, I think that's a possibility for schools to take on, but to be honest, that means that we're effectively going to spend more taxpayer money or take away learning resource from children who are at school in order to help children who weren't at school. That's why it's so important. Our whole system works if you can get all of the children in the class at the time they're meant to be there. That's so much more efficient for everyone involved.
Just on the supports available, we've spoken to some people working in the attendance service space who say they're concerned about contracts being taken away from local providers and given to bigger providers. Are you confident you've got sort of the right providers in place to engage with students on a local level?
Yeah, I am. I mean, this is also based on an Education Review Office report where they found that, frankly, some of the providers were just hopeless. They were letting the site down. We have cancelled contracts and we've put in place new contracting, and some people haven't been renewed, but I believe that we will be putting in place more effective contractors where that has happened. Now, I recognise that has led to some real disappointment. There's one in particular I was quite surprised, given the visits I've made. I was surprised that they weren't recontracted to all of the places they previously were. However, I haven't visited the people who did get the contract. Perhaps they are doing something better. So by getting rid of all the contracts, we've got rid of a lot of low performers that Aero identified, and we've got a clean slate and we've got a higher standard right across the board. That's got to be good for the extra taxpayer money we're putting in to get more children not only to school, but to keep attending once we get them back there.
Do you think the school lunches program has helped improve attendance?
Unfortunately, it hasn't. Under the previous government, there was some research into that where they checked, children who were in the 25th percentile and eligible and the 26th percentile, therefore not eligible. What they discovered was that the difference was negligible. I think it made a 1.6% difference to the number of children regularly attending. I mean, to put that in context, we've raised that by 20 points in the last 2 years. So, questionable that it was making a difference.
Okay. And would I be able to ask a question on another topic? A new poll?
If you guys are all done, yeah.
Thank you. And just your reaction to the latest Taxpayers Union poll. So it shows ACT is on 6.6%, quite far behind New Zealand First on 10.6%. What do you make of that?
Oh, it's been a long, hard winter, and yet I know that people are going to be judging next year on have you fixed what matters and done the work so that New Zealand can have a brighter future. I'd rather have my head down and my bum up than my head in the clouds right now.
Does it surprise you that the Greens are up to 12%, for example?
Well, some might say that puts a little bit of a question mark over the whole poll after the behaviour they've exhibited. I see Te Pāti Māori are up after the behaviour they've exhibited. So, look, maybe we just haven't misbehaved enough in this poll.
Why do you think NZ First is pulling so far ahead of ACT?
There's no theory behind that. Sometimes we're ahead, sometimes they're ahead. I don't recall you being asked why we've been ahead of them for most of the last 5 years. So.
And National Party's dropped 20 points.
20 points. Whoa! You should be back at the office writing that story up.
Into the 20s. Yeah. Apologies. What do you make of that?
Not a lot. Long, hard winter. Like ACT, bearing the brunt of economic management. And people are asking, well, where are the results? The work's been done now. The results come from doing the work, and I'm confident that fixing what matters each day actually does pay off in time, and that voters will see it.
And if I could just ask, the latest economic quarterly survey of economic confidence in businesses. Sorry, it's probably not the right title, but I think you know what I mean. It shows that there has been a slip in confidence in the September quarter. How important is it, do you think, that the Reserve Bank should perhaps add some stimulus? I know you can't really comment on that in terms of what they should do, but do you think that it's time for some more stimulus in the economy?
Well, if you ask me as a mortgage holder, I hope they cut. Ask me as Deputy Prime Minister, they're completely independent and I have nothing to say. Look, I think what's really critical is the old saying by, I think it was FDR in America, we've got nothing to fear but fear itself. It's critical that we don't end up with people making this a self-fulfilling prophecy. The truth is, I believe New Zealand has a bright future. I look at the results that we've just heard today from the Education Review Office. Young people in New Zealand are redoubling their commitment to education. That means that New Zealand is a good bet for investing, for living, for working. This country has a very bright future, even if it hasn't been a very bright winter.
Thank you.
No problem, guys. Well, thank you very much for coming out, and thanks again to Mr. Ames and the senior leadership team and the senior student team. Thank you very much.
Yeah.